Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today, How to Convert Community Stakeholders to Impact Investors. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So all callers will be muted. If you have questions, feel free to use the chat box that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. If you lose your internet connection, you can reconnect using the link that was emailed to you. If you have to drop off early or if you want to watch the webinar at a later time, we will be hosting the webinar on our website at TechSoup.org/community/events-webinars. We'll also be sending an email with the presentation, the recording, and any relevant links once the webinar is over. We're also on social media, so if you want to tweet at us, we're at TechSoup, and you can use hashtag TSWebinars. But like I said earlier, all of the questions and answers we'll be taking from the Q&A box that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. So just a little bit about TechSoup before we get started. We are in 236 countries and territories. We serve over 1 million nonprofits around the world. We partner with several technology organizations like Adobe, Amazon Web Services, Intuit, Microsoft, Symantec to help make our mission possible, offering donated or discounted technology to nonprofits. If you are a nonprofit and you're curious about what technology is available to you, you can use the URL below where it says Get Product Donations to see what your organization is qualified to receive. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce everyone that is on today's call. So my name is Seema, and I'm the online learning producer here at TechSoup. We have Zareen. She's on the back end, and she's going to be helping with the technical side of our chat today. And then we have our speakers. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce everyone. So our first speaker is, so we have John Katovich, who is the founder of Cutting Edge Capital and principal at Bequia Securities. John has over 30 years of experience as a securities lawyer and entrepreneur. He was general counsel at the Pacific Stock Exchange and the Boston Stock Exchange and the chief regulator officer for the NASDAQ subsidiary that regulates options trading. John is also a principal with Bequia Securities, DBA SVX.US, an SEC licensed and FINRA registered U.S. broker-dealer. John heads up the West Coast branch of Bequia and is responsible for the facilitation of securities transactions on the SVX.US platform. We also have Adam Spence. Adam Spence is the founder and director of Social Venture Connection and Mars. Adam helped found the Mars Center for Impact Investing and the School for Social Entrepreneurs, Ontario. He was the executive director of the Ontario Association of Food Banks, and he led a number of higher education and training organizations. And then lastly, we have Ken Tsunoda, who is the VP of Development at TechSoup. As Vice President of Development, Ken Tsunoda directs investments, grants management, and foundation relationships at TechSoup while also providing guidance to build NGO Source as the leading resource for grant makers to obtain equivalency determinations. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to John.
Thank you so much, Seema. And what we're going to do to begin with is give a little background, a little history of SVX, and my partner Adam Spence from SVX Canada is going to give an introduction about what this is all about, how it began, and what it means for our future here in the United States. And I'll come back again and talk about SVX US once Adam is finished with his presentation. Adam?
Perfect. Thanks very much, John, and thanks for those for joining us today and for TechSoup to host this particular webinar. Really important, I thought, to give a bit of context first. So when you think as a nonprofit organization or a social enterprise, I'm sure a lot of folks on the line would fit that profile, some investors as well. But why do we do it? So one, we're faced with intractable social environmental problems at a global and a local level. So everything from climate change, and we know the costs of that are incredibly high. It could be $2 trillion by mid-century. Issues around poverty and inequality at a local and a global level as well. We know that 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. or 13 million children may not know where their next meal is coming from. Over 1 billion people live on less than $1.25 a day. a lot of significant economic transition taking place, and other issues like chronic health around diabetes. Nonprofit organizations and social enterprises are really exploring and developing new business models to tackle these problems, and now they're turning to investors for support, and they're doing that again at a local, regional, and national level. And so the challenge, though, is one of lack of access to capital, so money, to be able to start and scale your impact. So if you're a nonprofit organization or an entrepreneur, you need to have impact capital in all its forms, from grants to investments, to be able to do that. And that's a fact of resources from government sources alone or community sources by themselves are unable to be able to mobilize the kind of money that's needed to be able to tackle the problems that we face. And so what's the opportunity? I think there's a lot of them, and this motivated our work when we started the idea for the SVX in 2007, and continues and perhaps becomes more important in terms of the opportunities that exist. So one is impact investing. We're going to talk a bit about that. Second is regulations, which are opening up the opportunity for not only folks on Wall Street or wealthy investors to be able to place their capital, but now increasingly folks on Main Street or individual investors, folks like you or I. There also has been an emergence of technology and financial technology solutions. One of them we'll talk about today, and experienced intermediaries, those individuals and organizations that are helping organizations, entrepreneurs, and investors to be able to find impact capital and to make good impact investments. And now the opportunity increasingly amongst communities. So the community of stakeholders that you work with, those communities that you live in, and those communities that gather and organize around particular issues of interest that are really representing an interesting opportunity to be able to raise impact capital to support the work of organizations. And this is all rallying around the concept, which, although it's been around for a very long time, but that of impact investing. And so impact investing was coined as a phrase in 2007. And these are investments into companies, organizations, and funds that intend to generate two things. So one is social and environmental impact. That might be greenhouse gas emission reductions. That might be providing employment for persons with disabilities or persons that live in poverty. And also alongside that, delivering a financial return. And so that might be return of principal, or that might be market rate, or even beyond market rate return. So this idea that you can actually blend your motivations, one of the values that you have and that you hold, and also the need for your savings or your investment account. You can do that in one spot. And as I said, this is long-lasting from the Quakers in the middle part of the 18th century until today, which is now representing a very large and growing marketplace. So just in this past year alone, there has been a significant increase in capital that is dedicated towards impact investments, or these organizations and enterprises that are generating positive impact, folks like TechSoup. There's $228 billion invested by the top 200 plus investors around the world. It's experienced significant growth annually. And then assets are going to grow even more than that by 2020. That figure, $307 billion, was marked a few years ago, and we would imagine that will exceed that, going to reach into the 2020s above potentially $1 trillion is dedicated with the investments that have a triple bottom line, or a return that is blended. And so I'm going to pass it over to John to talk just a bit about SVX in terms of it as a tool, and then I'll give a bit more background in terms of our story as well.
Thanks, Adam. So as you can imagine, SVX US grows out of this partnership with SVX Canada, and we want to make sure that everybody understands that this is not just about building a platform or even a platform with a broker-dealer. This is really a concept of a partnership of the ideas behind SVX and the broker-dealer and cutting-edge capital, where we all came together and realized that the things that we have been working on, the places we intend to go, and the people we want to intersect with can be done most effectively if we come together and partner. And by utilizing the great work that SVX has already done in Canada, by relying on the work that we've been doing at Cutting Edge Capital, and then bringing in a broker-dealer, Bequia Securities, that I have now joined, which is growing quickly, but all focused on the same areas of impact, social responsibility, good company practices. That's what this is really all about. It's not so much about the technology, but the technology is useful. It allows us to help connect and activate and transform the deals and the investors and make this a much more efficient engine than had we just all come together and operated by ourselves, or even trying to do this in partnership. It definitely helps to have good technology to help us put in dashboards, visualize the process, make it easy for investments to happen, make it easy for us to do the work we need to do when we have to be responsible as a broker-dealer that is ensuring suitability of deals and suitability of investors. So it becomes extremely important in today's environment to utilize technology to do that, and we have found great technology through our platform partner that SVX created originally. So what does this mean? We come in with a broker-dealer, and that is SEC and FINRA registered. Our fundraising, impact, quality issues, it would be very much the same if we didn't have a technology platform. As a broker-dealer, we would be doing due diligence. We would be working with a company to make sure that it was appropriate for an investment. We would make sure that we had detailed all the things we need to do, comply with the regulators, which in our view is a good thing, not a bad thing, because it forces everybody to make sure that they're operating above board, transparently, and complying with the rules that we need to do if we're going to be a broker-dealer. And the same thing with our investors. We have to make sure that we understand who they are, that we know them, that the deals are suitable for them. Sometimes the deals will be just for accredited investors, but as you'll hear more from TechSoup and Ken Sonata, the deal can be quite interesting where we can reach out to many more people, not just accredited investors, which is what we're really excited about. So there you have it. We have brought together all of these components, the Canadian partner, the broker-dealer, what we do at Cutting Edge Capital, and the technology provider. And this is just another display of who we all are as a team. And you can come back and look up each and every one of us if you like. So let's say a company is interested in raising capital. There's many ways to look at trying to do this. And today we're really focused more on the nonprofit organization side. But certainly there will be other issues that we will look at that are in the for-profit area as well. But in the nonprofit side, in order to do a fundraising like the kind we're going to show you today, it really needs to be the kind of organization that has the ability to show that it can pay back debt notes with revenues that it brings in. So there may be non-repayable amounts that a company can raise, that's fine. There may be other opportunities for revenues that they bring in. What is important is that when we showcase an offering, we must be able to provide a good, clear picture in terms of a projection why, if a company is raising funds through notes, why it will be able to pay those funds back with the interest. And those projections are based on financials, and they're based on a good case for what they're going to use the funds for, what they're going to build toward, and how the revenues will be substantial enough to be able to repay. And so when you're thinking about raising funds, naturally this slide is probably not a surprise to anybody that understands where you think you might need to go for capital. Certainly from if you're a company that's just starting out, you might focus on the left side individuals, middle tier institution and intermediaries. And then of course you might think about the web and events and platforms. And that's really where we're coming in and talking about what we're doing now at SVX US. So certainly many places to go for capital. What we built toward is attempting to have the ability to respond to almost any kind of need to raise capital. Some people may not be ready for direct public offerings. Some people may need to go to individuals, friends, and family first, or they might be eligible to raise funds on one of the new crowdfunding platforms. It's really not until they're a little more stable, more revenue producing, that we're going to be able to help them at the broker-dealer platform level. And, again, here is a slide that kind of gives you an idea where traditional sources of capital might exist for people that are in the nonprofit space, especially because of some of the foundations and others, but also for for-profits. There are some names on this list here that certainly will cross both over to for-profit and nonprofits or investments. Back to cutting-edge capital and direct public offerings, of course, People's Community Market is one of the better-known approaches that was utilized to raise capital through a direct public offering. And this one was a California-only direct public offering, so we call it an intrastate offering or a qualification by permit. And this was coming out of People's Community Market, where much effort had been made to try to raise funds from traditional sources, and they were turned down at every step. It wasn't until we helped them get a direct public offering and get people from the community to begin to support the efforts that more attention started to be drawn to this. We have now helped them to do multiple direct public offerings over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, and they have certainly received much more attention beyond even the investors that have come in, and now they've broken ground, they're building, they hope to launch possibly by the end of this year, early in next year, and it really is truly going to be a community place, a community gathering. But what you think about here from a store or a community location, you can think of community in many different ways, where your community may extend far beyond just the West Oakland area, possibly across the country, or in the case of TechSoup, around the world. And so what we do is we work with issuers, and we try to help them understand what is the pathway. If you do believe that you can focus on a community, how do you get there? What do you do before to get ready? How do you begin to activate your crowd? What kind of messages are you going to send, both before or after you're ready to start your fundraising? And the management of momentum, being mindful about all of the securities rules, which of course we take on responsibility to do if we're working with you as a broker-dealer. But all of these things are super important to think about and focus on, and we really want to know that people are ready before we take them in as a client, That's also important to us as well. We would prefer not to see people fail. Our goal is really for the building of the community and community capital and building stronger relationships economically. So, Adam, I'm coming back to you, and I would like you, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit more about SVX in general.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks, John. And so, I mean, you see there around out of the opportunities that are presented and the model that we are kind of replicating and bringing to the U.S. And that's one that takes advantage of existing regulations, so things like direct public offerings, Reg A+, et cetera, which we're happy to talk about in conversation. But those rules that allow enterprises and organizations to be able to raise capital from the general public. And also, out of this interesting business model, and which includes a fintech solution, that's SVX, which can open up the market opportunity for both private investment opportunities or ones that are generally focused on accredited investors. And so accredited investors, for those folks that are less familiar, that's generally the definition of someone who is wealthy. And that would be someone that has $1 million plus in net worth. Or there's also income standards as well, which again we can talk about. But what this platform combines is both private investments as well as retail investments in one spot. So think of SVX as a marketplace or a platform for ventures, funds, and investors seeking impact alongside return. And so it is an access point for, again, the general public to be able to make investments and for folks to be able to raise capital in clean tech, health, education, food, and people. It, in Canada, was powered by an organization called Mars Discovery District, which is an innovation hub that's focused on driving Canada's innovation agenda, supporting entrepreneurs and systems change, but also supported by and done in collaboration with the Toronto Stock Exchange, or the TMX Group, which is the parent company, and the Government of Ontario. We ourselves are a nonprofit organization. We are registered as well as something called an exempt market dealer, which is the equivalent of a broker-dealer in the U.S. And so have a similar regulatory framework which allows us to be able to navigate and help organizations and entrepreneurs to be able to connect with their community and mobilize that. And that's what we're really excited about with the TechSoup campaign. And so those are the two basic things, that we really do. So helping investors make good impact investments. So these are high net worth foundations, family offices, but also the general public as well, and issuers raising capital. And so anyone from a cooperative focused on renewable energy to a nonprofit organization that provides loans for new Canadians or immigrants to the country. And so really we do, 4 basic things, and I'll talk about this in a bit more detail across the slides. But I think as you were thinking about mobilizing your community to be able to raise capital, building in these components to your strategy, all of them or a few of them will be very important. So first, being educated and understanding, the business model and the opportunity around impact investing for your organization, getting the right kind of advice and support from external organizations to assist you with that process. Raising money can often be a full-time job in and of itself. Getting the right kind of support on a transaction basis to be able to raise money. There's lots of different platforms that are out there. We think ours is well situated to support impact companies and organizations, and then have the right kind of management tools post to be able to navigate and connect with your investors, to provide them with reports and updates. So our model is focused on that education aspect. So we deliver boot camps, workshops, and programs for entrepreneurs to support their investment readiness, but also we work with investors as well to support their investor readiness, making sure that they're able to take that interest in impact investing to a place where they can take action. And then we provide a lot of advisory supports as well, so speaking to the need for organizations of all stripes, from later stage companies to longer lasting nonprofits. And so an example here, we worked with Windmill Microlending that provides small loans to new Canadians to be able to provide the pathway for them to have their credentials recognized. and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that was a $5 million capital raise that we're working on to be able to grow their lending pool. Got that transaction portal that we are modifying and going to be deploying into the U.S. market, which we're really excited about, which includes a lot of great tools. And we work with a lot of outstanding organizations, and we see this in Canada as a really great case for scale in the U.S., that there are startups, there are funds, there are scaling companies and growing ventures that we believe a lot of investors are quite keen on. And they see the opportunity because they're resilient enterprises, businesses, or organizations that can deliver a stable and resilient financial return. And then we take folks through a rigorous review process. And again, when you're thinking about your capital raise, or as you look to reach out to your community, they're going to ask you a lot of questions about the quality of the enterprise, how you're going to pay them back. And so we make sure we take folks through a rigorous review. First, the base criteria, doing analysis, providing support, have it reviewed by an external committee, having it sign off, and then ultimately launch on the platform. And then we make sure as well that folks have the right kind of reporting on an ongoing basis to demonstrate their impact in community. And this gives you the example of Windmill Microlending, which, as mentioned before, is providing small loans to new Canadians in order to access better credentials. And so as you're thinking about that, increasingly folks are matching their impact investments to the Sustainable Development Goals. And in this case, we've been able to match Windmill Microlending to goals 1, 10, and 8, particularly around poverty, decent work and economic growth, and reducing inequality, as is evidenced. And this is important as well in terms of connecting with community, at first in terms of your plan, but also in terms of your reporting, to showcase that indeed you have positive traction. And so the key stat for Windmill is that a $7,000 loan, which is what they provide on average, is going to increase someone's income from $16,000 a year to $50,000 a year after they've paid that back. So dramatically increasing the quality of life, reducing poverty for a household, and not only on an individual basis, but also that opportunity to be able to give back to society as their income grows. And that they've got really strong repayment rates. So as an organization, they have strong performance. And we see that as being very positive as well. Other supports we provide are around management. So we also have a small fund, and we look to roll that out in other jurisdictions across Canada, maybe some opportunities to do that in the U.S. as well. But that gives you just a bit of a sense of some of the work that we're doing in Canada. And you see here just some of the traction that we've had in the market to date. And again, really excited about that opportunity to be able to work with folks like Bequia Securities and with folks like TechSoup to be able to bring that model and learn a lot from what you are doing in the U.S. So that gives you a bit of background on the opportunity, what's happening in the U.S., and how we've shaped out our activities in Canada. I'll pass it on. John, any final thoughts?
Yeah. So I just wanted to now make a introduction briefly to Ken at TechSoup, and to say that we've been working with Ken and the others at TechSoup for a couple years now on their fundraising strategy, which then turned into a fundraising strategy utilizing Regulation A+. And I just also wanted to say that this has been a phenomenal project for so many different reasons. I'm sure everybody is aware of just how awesome TechSoup is as a company and all the great things that they do. So we couldn't be more excited to be launching our platform in the United States with a company like this. And I'm going to allow Ken the ability to tell everybody about how awesome this investment is and how about the company and what its plans are. So Ken, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much, John and Adam, and thanks, John, for the very kind introduction. As John and Adam mentioned, TechSoup has recently launched a campaign to raise the growth capital that we need to invest in implementing our strategic plan. And we've been working with John and the Cutting Edge Capital team, as well as with Adam and SVX and Bequia in devising a strategy to make it possible for all of TechSoup's stakeholders to be part of this campaign, and not just as donors, but also as impact investors, investing alongside with us as we grow and benefiting the civil society sector with increased social impact, and also giving our stakeholders a financial return on their investment. And we've wanted to do it in a way that engages all of our stakeholders in our community as impact investors, not just the foundations that support us with grants and the corporate partners who work with us to donate their technology products, but also the nonprofit organizations that we serve and their employees. And I have to say it's been a fascinating learning process over the last several months as we've designed and launched this campaign. We're still fairly in the early stages, but I thought I'd share with you a few insights and lessons learned that we've gotten along the way. So let me first start with just a few words about TechSoup and our growth capital strategy, and I'll describe some of the more innovative aspects of our campaign. And then I'll wrap up with some lessons learned that may be helpful for other nonprofits thinking about how to raise capital through impact investment. So you can think of TechSoup as a bridge that uses technology to enable connections and innovative solutions for a more equitable planet. Like the nonprofits that we serve around the world, TechSoup is itself a 501c3 nonprofit social enterprise founded about 30 years ago with about 200 employees, but we're much more than that. This image here captures in a very powerful way for me what TechSoup is about. It was taken last year at our Global Network Partner Summit, where representatives of our 70 partner organizations from around the world got together in San Francisco for a week, and along with TechSoup staff to learn from each other and plan our future. They are all leading capacity building organizations supporting the nonprofit sectors in their home countries and regions. There's no more powerful global network to support civil society than the TechSoup Global Network. Seema in her introduction covered some of this, so I won't go into too much detail, but what's really amazing to me about TechSoup is that there are literally hundreds of thousands of nonprofits in nearly every country around the world with stories about how TechSoup has impacted them and the communities that they serve. In total, we've helped over 1 million nonprofits in 236 countries and territories so far to access over $1 billion, over $11 billion in donated and sharply discounted technology and funding. Last year alone, we distributed almost $2 billion in value to civil society organizations. And TechSoup has more than 100 long-standing relationships with leading corporations, including Adobe, Cisco, Intuit, Microsoft, and Symantec. Our corporate partners provide donations or sharply discounted offers of their products and services to nonprofits as part of their corporate philanthropy, but in many cases they lack the staffing and specialized infrastructure to properly vet, fulfill, and support these requests. TechSoup provides a solution that enables our corporate partners to manage these offers at global scale. And although TechSoup has helped over 1 million nonprofits globally so far, we really feel like we just scratched the surface and there's so much more impact yet to be had. We know that there are over 12 million civil society organizations around the world. It's truly amazing the scale and the scope of what they do. In aggregate, these 12 million organizations represent 4.5% of global GDP, about the same size as the German economy or the global construction industry. And they have an estimated workforce of 250 million people, including both their employees and their volunteers. But much more importantly, these organizations collectively serve billions of the world's most vulnerable people in an incredible diversity of ways, from food security to healthcare, education, and disaster response. But these 12 million organizations are badly under-resourced in an increasingly digital world, and TechSoup is committed to changing that. And we've put together a strategic plan to invest $11.5 million of growth capital to enable us to do just that. We're so excited to announce that TechSoup has launched a direct public offering to raise that growth capital. We just received SEC approval to launch a debt securities offering that enables us to reach out to all the stakeholders in our community across all 50 states and to engage them as impact investors, and to do it in amounts as small as $50. TechSoup is the first nonprofit organization to get SEC approval to do this innovative type of offering, a Reg A plus Tier 2 offering. Because we're a nonprofit social enterprise that gets 90% of its revenue from earned income, instead of asking for donations, we can receive investment in the form of debt securities and invest it to grow our revenue and operating efficiencies so we can repay investors after 5 years with interest. We have two objectives for this offering. First, to raise the $11.5 million in growth capital we need over the next 3 years. But just as importantly, our second objective is to engage our community of people who care about TechSoup as stakeholders and as impact investors investing alongside us in our future. This includes not just wealthy institutions like foundations, but also the grassroots nonprofits we serve and their employees. We believe that we're developing an innovative approach to raising growth capital that can be not just a platform for TechSoup to raise the capital we need, but can also be used by other nonprofit social enterprises as a model to support their growth. Here's just a quick picture of the investment terms for our DPO. We've structured our offerings so that all of our stakeholders, both accredited and non-accredited investors, can participate at a level that's comfortable for them. Starting on the left side, for our community investors who invest between $50 and $2,500, we are offering a 2% annual interest rate and a 5-year term. So at the end of 5 years, we'll repay their investment with 2% annual interest. For investors who invest between $2,500 and up to $50,000, we offer a 5-year term and 3.5% annual interest. And for accredited investors, so for wealthier investors and institutions only who can commit $50,000 or more, we offer a 5% annual interest rate. We're very excited about the social impact that will result from these investments. We've done an analysis of the amount of additional resource that we'll be able to distribute to the global civil society sector as a result of this investment. And we're thrilled that for every $100 invested in this offering, we'll be able to distribute an additional $47,000 in needed resources to nonprofit organizations. And we'll be able to nearly double the number of nonprofits we're serving globally. We feel that the social return on investment opportunity with this offer is very strong and very well defined. And we're very excited that one of our corporate donor partners, a leading technology company that we've been working with for many years, has committed to investing $1 million in our DPO to help us launch. As Adam shared in his comments, there are billions of dollars of capital that investors are committing to impact investing. We've seen numbers between $228 billion in 2017 and $310 billion in expected capital committed in 2020. What does all of this mean for nonprofits like TechSoup? I do think that this huge pool of capital can be an opportunity for nonprofits through a few targeted strategies. A lot of the assets that are being invested in impact investing are going to funds of publicly traded securities and to impact investments in for-profit social impact businesses. But some of it's being invested as debt financing for nonprofits as well. And debt financing for nonprofits is particularly important for nonprofit social enterprises with earned revenues that can enable them to repay a loan by using their earned revenues to generate cash flow. We know that some charitable foundations make program-related investments in the form of loans to nonprofits at below market rates. There are some organizations that Adam mentioned that have loan funds that provide debt financing to nonprofits, including the Nonprofit Finance Fund. Well, what we decided as TechSoup was that it's very important for us to engage our community of stakeholders as investors And we wanted to do it in a way that allows us to reach out not just to wealthy investors, but also to people in our community who can consider only smaller investments. As John mentioned earlier, there are new security structures that make it possible for nonprofits to raise capital from their communities. And his team at Cutting Edge Capital has helped us put together our strategy to raise capital through a direct public offering of securities. In addition to our DPO, we're anticipating that a large portion of our growth capital campaign will be loans from institutions that specialize in lending to nonprofit organizations. And these loans are based on better terms that are typically available from commercial lenders. In closing, I'd just like to offer some of my lessons learned so far. First, it's really critical to have strong advisors like John and the Cutting Edge Capital team and Adam and SVX and Bequia Securities to guide you through the complexities of securities law and capital markets. It required a significant amount of financial and operational planning to put together the offering materials that were needed for the securities filings. And it's also really important to have an earned income strategy that allows you as a nonprofit social enterprise to grow your revenue and increase your efficiencies to make sure you can pay back the principal with interest over time. As John mentioned, there are several different regulatory approaches for doing crowdfunded investment campaigns, and which one you choose depends on how much capital you want to raise, whether you want to do a local state campaign or a broader multi-state or national campaign, and whether you want to engage both wealthy accredited investors and also people in your community with a range of different levels of economic means. We chose to do a national campaign across all 50 states, which makes sense for TechSoup because we have stakeholders across the country. But it also increased the degree of difficulty because we chose to have our offering regulated at a federal level by the SEC. Another lesson learned is that it's crucial to have a partner like SVX to serve as a transaction platform and as a partner to help get the word out about the offering to impact investors and the media. And it's difficult to create a structure that allows you to accept investments with small minimum amounts, like in amounts as small as $50 like we are, because of the transaction costs involved. But we believe strongly that it's possible and worth doing because of the opportunity to engage all of our stakeholders in financing our future growth. We really see it as an investment in our community. And as our campaign progresses and we learn from our experiences as a nonprofit trying to raise capital from impact investors, we're committed to sharing our learning with all of you and with the sector. We want others in the sector to benefit from it, so I ask that you please stay tuned for more about the experiences that we're having in our lessons learned. And I'd like to thank you all so much for taking the time to be here with us today. Hope that you will consider joining us, possibly as an investor in TechSoup's transformation. We're proud to have SVX as a partner launching our offering in the United States. Our offering goes live on their impact investing marketplace on November 13th, and we'll be able to receive investments through their platform then. So many thanks to Adam and team for helping us to get our offering off the ground, and a big thank you to John and the Cutting Edge Capital team who've been wonderful advisors to us along the way in putting the strategy together. And with that, I'll turn it back to Seema.
All right, so we have about 15 minutes for Q&A, so if you guys have questions, feel free to use the chat box to ask them. So we have a few questions that have already come in, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with the first one. So one question that we got was, how is this different from a socially responsible mutual fund?
Mm-hmm. So I'll be happy to respond. So a mutual fund is where an investor decides that they're going to invest through an entity that has created the fund, and they will then manage the funds that come in. They will then decide, based on their own due diligence, which kinds of companies they want to take the funds and invest those into. So a fund can be a much easier way to go when you're an investor if you're not thinking that you have a particular company in mind that you definitely want to invest in, or if you're just not sure that it's right for you to be doing any kind of review and reading materials and all of that required when you do an investment. Funds are typically, like mutual funds, managed by something, or they come under a law called the 1940 Investment Act, and it can be a very difficult and very expensive act to have to comply with, which is why mutual funds are typically very large in scope. Although I will say that a lot of work that my partner Brian Bequia is doing at Cutting Edge Capital is around different exemptions of the 1940 Act, allowing for a lot of different entities to create community funds that allow individuals from whatever kind of community to invest, and then providing some tools and education, assisting with what is needed to be a fund manager so that the fund can set up and then invest in community deals. So that's really a big difference. This TechSoup offering naturally is not through a fund, it's directly into TechSoup, which was qualified by the SEC to be able to do this kind of an offering.
Perfect. Okay. So the next question that we have, in terms of the rates of return for the DPO, how are those determined?
Right. So we worked on that quite a bit with the TechSoup group that was working on this project. And TechSoup also brought in an outside consulting firm to help figure out, design what we could offer. And we really had a few things in mind. One is, what are the costs and the expenses that get created when you're bringing in larger sums of funds? How much more diligence is required on suitability? And then you have to factor in also whether the investment is coming from an entity that is accredited, whether it meets the accredited investor status. For the much smaller fund offering component, we had to figure out if the ability to bring those in was in fact going to be a lot less time and effort and required maybe a more systemic approach to being able to bring them in. And then, the other component is risk. How much capital are you putting up at risk? Certainly a $50,000 investment could be considered riskier than a $50 investment. Of course, then that has to factor in with which entity is making the $50,000 investment. So we factored in many different things, and ultimately, based on revenue projections and what we felt were going to be the appropriate investments that were coming in, we settled on the 3 notes that you saw Ken talk about there.
Okay. And then in terms of the investments, are they tax deductible?
Right. So they're not tax deductible because you're investing and you're receiving your principal and your interest back from the entity. However, we are going to allow for any one of those 3 notes to be turned into a donation at any point in time. And if that happens, then they do become tax deductible, and TechSoup is ready to work with every investor if they choose to do that.
All right, gotcha. And then do you guys work with B Corporations?
Absolutely. We love B Corp. Cutting Edge has been a B Corp since the inception of the B, and we're now a benefit corp as well. So we definitely understand what that means, what it's all about. I've been in and around the world of ratings and impact ratings of all kinds. So yeah, SVX has, one of the great things about SVX is that it allows for us to use many tools that they have developed over the last 10 years. And a lot of those tools were developed at the same time that B was in development. So you're going to see between B and SVX and Gears and other rating agencies the ability to utilize best practices. And whether it's B or Gears or an SVX approach, the important thing is that it's a company that is intending to show through transparency why it is a good citizen and why it's behaving well and why it deserves to be invested in.
All right, gotcha. Okay. I think that's it for our questions today, unless anybody else wants to chat them in. Otherwise, I think we are almost at time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. If you guys don't mind, we have a post-event survey that we send out once the webinar is over, so any feedback that you have for us is always really helpful. We encourage you to check out the links for DPO that we sent out earlier. If you're on social media, feel free to give us a follow. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And then we also have a blog where we post lots of tips and tricks and how-tos and things like that. And anything related to DPO, we'll be posting any announcements there as well. We have a few webinars that are coming up this week. If you are interested in attending, you can see the URL at the bottom where we have all of the information to register. And lastly, I would like to go ahead and thank our presenters today, John, Adam, and Ken, and thank you to Zareen for helping on the back end. And then lastly, thank you to our sponsor, ReadyTalk. So thank you for attending today, and we hope to see you at the next one.